A new Vice report claims that Koreans don't want to admit they're eating Chinese kimchi, as much of the kimchi consumed each year in South Korea is actually imported from the country's biggest trading partner. I spoke with the author of the story to find out more about what he calls a crisis in kimchi land.
My name is Dave Hazan, and I write all about Korean society and culture for various magazines in and out of the country. Well, the crisis is that most of the kimchi the Koreans seem to be eating is coming from China. Kimchi is very much bound up in Korean culture. I mean, it's thousands of years old, possibly. Although the version they eat now is actually only maybe a few hundred years old, but still, I mean, it's absolutely integral to Korean culture. And it's just many Koreans consider it shameful that they eat so much kimchi that's imported from another country. I mean, most Koreans will make their own kimchi. And then certainly when you go to the supermarket, you don't see any Chinese kimchi, or at least you see very little. So all of it's in the restaurants and the cafeterias. And the idea there is that it's hidden in that case. It's out of sight, out of mind.
Despite the national pride associated with kimchi, Hazan says there's one very simple reason Chinese-produced imports have become so popular.
It's extremely cheap. In some cases, it's a quarter of the price. How many restaurants are using it, I'm not sure. There are different figures that have been thrown around. Someone said 90%, 95% of the cheap restaurants. Joe McPherson put it really well. He said that if you're ordering the 7,000 won businessman's lunch special, then you can be pretty certain that that it's Chinese kimchi you're eating.
I also spoke with Joe McPherson, the man behind Korea's first English-language food blog, ZenKimchi.com, about Korea's kimchi identity and where you'll find Chinese kimchi while eating out in South Korea.
Kimchi is pretty much synonymous with Korean identity. In fact, there are panic articles coming about every time that some other product like coffee or bread is more popular than kimchi, because there's this panic that Koreans are losing their souls. So when you think of kimchi, you got to think of Korea. When you think of Korea, you got to think of kimchi. Some restaurants on the higher end that aren't the cheap lunch stops do serve Chinese kimchi. Not all of them do. Now, I do know some really good restaurants that aren't the cheap lunch places that actually just make their own kimchi. They find it's more economical to do it that way, or they're just really proud to do that. But for me, I can really just tell the difference between cheap kimchi and not so cheap kimchi. And the country of origin is irrelevant. I have had Chinese kimchi. It tasted just as good as something made right over in Gwangju. So it's not really been, I can't really tell the taste difference other than one kimchi is cheaply made and one is not. And people really don't want to admit that your national dish is made by foreigners.
With Chinese kimchi offering such a cheap alternative, Vice writer Dave Hazan says it's become a multi-million-dollar import into Korea.
The figures I had that I got from the IMF, a publication of the IMF, was that they import about $100 million worth of Chinese kimchi into Korea every year. There was one exception, which was 2009, which is because of that year China had a particularly strong currency. But otherwise, since about 2006, it's been about $100 million worth has been coming in. So obviously, this is not good for big manufacturers. Incidentally, what's also interesting is that their restaurants are required by law to label where their kimchi comes from, as long as they're a certain square footage or larger. The same way that they have to label where their meat comes from, and some do, many do, but many don't, or it's just really hard to find.
But aside from perhaps a loss of Korean culinary pride, are there actually any health risks associated with eating Chinese kimchi?
Food scandals in China are as regular as the seasons. They go, you see it all the time or it's in the news all the time at least, the problems with food inspection in China. So, any edible product that comes out of China, you might want to be weary of. So, yeah, there were reports of, in the past, there was lead and parasitic eggs that come from human feces. This was a while ago, though. I do believe the fears over Chinese kimchi are probably overblown. I mean, it's just the way of Koreans saying, just don't eat that stuff, eat your own stuff. It's not different at all, as far as anyone can tell. In fact, the World Kimchi Society, when I interviewed them, they bristled when I said Chinese kimchi. They corrected me to say, you mean Chinese-made kimchi. There is no difference. Some kimchi aficionados will claim there's like a terroir to it. The cabbage comes from the soil here. It'll taste different, the same way like grapes from a certain part of France will make a certain wine. But that's pretty far-fetched. I don't think that's very likely. Because basically it's the same product. And I had actually a shopper in Shanghai go to a supermarket and take a look at the kimchi for sale there. And it was made by this Korean food company. And that was the kimchi being sold in China. Now, obviously, it's manufactured there, but that's a Korean company.
And finally, how does the future look for kimchi here in South Korea? Might national pride or some other force lead to a resurgence in the Korean kimchi market? Or is Chinese-made kimchi here to stay?
No, it's here to stay. I think it's here to stay. I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm pretty certain that as long as it's a quarter of the price, people are going to buy it. Or at least the restaurants are going to buy it. And I wouldn't be surprised if in the future it started working its way into some people's homes. As the whole idea of kimjang, making your own kimchi, is the tradition is declining somewhat. And so I think some people are just not doing it anymore. They're buying kimchi at the grocery store. And people always want to save money. And I think when the time comes, it will eventually, I think, start showing up in grocery stores. The Kimchi Federation has put out this emblem that you can hang in your restaurant that says 100% Korean kimchi, meaning that all the ingredients come from Korea. But I don't think it's going to be of much interest to anyone except maybe specialty restaurants.
For KoreaFM.net, I'm Chance Dorland.